Welcome to the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast, your go-to source for insightful interviews and dynamic panel discussions in the worlds of treasury, banking, payments, fintech, and much more. Here now is your host, the Treasury Whisperer, Seth Marlowe.
Hello, Whisperies. Joining me today in the Whisperer studio is Stephanie Prebish. Stephanie is Senior Managing Director of Association Services at Nacha, where she leads key industry association efforts, including membership relations, conferences, education, professional accreditation, and programs that connect and develop payments professionals. Her work includes oversight of major Nacha education initiatives and accreditation programs, as well as helping shape industry events that bring together banks, fintechs, corporates, and payment leaders. A longtime payments professional, Stephanie previously spent 13 years at First Virginia Banks before joining Nacha. She is widely recognized as an advocate for collaboration, education, and the development of next generation payment leaders. Stephanie, welcome to the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast.
Seth, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for that kind introduction. It makes me sound very important. I appreciate that.
Well, Stephanie, you are very important in our wonderful ecosystem. So let's start talking about a little bit of your personal path, and I'll call it origin story. As I have found by doing these podcasts, that very few people really kind of woke up one day and said, I'm going to go into payments or banking. So I'll throw it over to you. How did this journey start? What did you expect to do? And how did you end up in banking?
You know, it's funny because I don't know what I expected to do. I had thought maybe a lawyer, but that was high school, and it was LA Law was on TV. So I thought I would be super cool that way. But when I was growing up, my best friend, her father was the president of a regional bank, and I wanted to be just like him. And so when I was in college, I ended up being a teller at the bank where he worked. And after I graduated from college and just stayed at the bank. I was there for 13 years until it got bought out. And then I joined Nacha through a classified ad in the newspaper.
No
It
way.
said, I swear to God, and it said electronic banking. And I remember getting the call from who would be my boss at the time, Deborah Shaw. And she said, I'm Deborah Shaw from Nacha. And I said, I don't know what Nacha is. And here I am 22 years later.
Wow. Unbelievable. But it continues the theme that I've seen through over 50 of these interviews that very few people really started right into it. The running joke in my house, a couple of them, was that my mom, as soon as I was old enough to be left alone as sort of a latchkey kid, she went and got a job as a bank teller, working for the once upon a time Chemical Bank and then Chase. And I think I made a remark to my college roommates that during this week of interviewing during senior year, why would I interview with the bank? There's no money in banks. And that, of course, got all sorts of laughs, and I never got to hear the end of that one.
Being a bank teller was the best job. I was only a teller for 6 months until they moved me over to customer service. But man, I would go back and work as a bank teller today. Like, it's the best job ever. It's so zen and just soothing. And I loved being a teller.
That's great. I think from the bank branches I've been in the last year or two, it seems like a fairly lonely job because not a lot of customers coming in.
Absolutely.
And they're very thinly staffed as well.
Yes. Gone are the days when you had 8 people on a teller line.
For sure. I remember waiting in long lines, particularly on Fridays when people were cashing payroll checks.
Right, exactly. But now 92% of the people use direct deposit, so you don't have to go cash your check anymore.
That's right. That was a nice little softball I just threw at you. You hit it out of the park. So let's talk a little bit about what I'll call the power of connection and collaboration in payments. Why do you see collaboration so central to the payments ecosystem?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And really, it's because our ecosystem changes from day to day virtually. It's so important for everyone to be in touch and to really make sure that the lines of communications are open. Because if you're seeing a problem with fraud, then the bank across the street is probably seeing that same problem. And if you are hearing about, the next big thing in payments, then I want to hear about that so I can project it to the entire industry. Over the course of my career here at Nacha, I've been so fortunate to work with so many industry groups, and we are passionate people. We love payments, and the layman doesn't really think about how their payment is made. They just want to make sure that it's getting there. But we are the big dorks who care about that stuff. I remember the first time I sent a Zelle payment, we were at work and we were like high-fiving in the hallway because it worked
Right.
so like it was so exciting for us. But that collaboration and that sense of camaraderie, I think is what drives our industry forward.
I think you're right. And there's so many people that have tied some form of payments to their own personal brand. I think of people like the payments professor and the payments Jedi, and there's so many of them. I guess it goes along with me being the Treasury Whisperer. It's a whole bunch of caped crusaders in and around payments and banking. So, in terms of Nacha, I think there's a misperception by people that are not as close to the industry. Certainly, a lot of it's so much more than that. And maybe you could talk about, all the great things that Nacha really does for the industry.
Yeah, obviously we do care about the rules and we write and we enforce them. Nacha is really two parts of the same whole. So we have our network side of the house that's led by Mike Hurd, who's really overseeing all of the rules and the risk and making sure that the network is safe and protected and churning and that it's growing and adapting to the world. And then we have the association side of the house, which I lead, where we're really bringing people together, we're educating, we're accrediting people, and we work together in addition to our net development team that's working on Fixius and making sure that all sorts of technology is being brought into the ACH network and beyond. So we really do so much more than, and I don't want to say just the rules because the rules are so important, but we do so much more than that. But we all work together as a great team. And it's funny because we hear all the time, gosh, your global world headquarters, and you guys must have thousands of people on staff. We have about 80 people who work for Nacha, and we do all of this work, but we do it passionately, and we do it as an advocate for the ACH network, but also for the payment system.
Sure. And what I think also is worth noting is with the new rail that's been established over the last several years, that Nacha plays a role there as well. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't think of the real-time networks as competition. We really think more of it as a complement to what we do. There's a use case for everything out there, but we understand how important real-time is. And so we started working with the Faster Payments Council and with our payments associations to develop the accredited Faster Payments Professional Program to just kind of signal to the world that we're on top of what's going on in faster payments and we want to be a voice. And when we launched same day ACH 10 years ago, we knew that faster was the future.
Wow. It's 10 years already.
I know it goes by quickly. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
coming up. September 18th is our 10-year anniversary.
So is that going to be a big celebration at headquarters?
We did a lot at the payments conference to acknowledge it, and I'm sure we have a lot of social media stuff planned to look back. And when you look at the growth of same day ACH, and now we have our $10 million limit coming in, you can really see that the industry wanted it, and so we were glad to be able to deliver.
That's great. So I want to go back to one of the products that you mentioned before. You mentioned Fixius, which I think for people that aren't real close to the industry may not be aware of what that is, but I think it's a extraordinarily important service that's available through Nacha. If you could talk about that.
Yeah, so with Fixius, we are able to use an API standard to really exchange information and to make sure that account verification is done. We're working with a number of the larger FIs to get the security and the account verification, like I said, using these API standards. And Fixius is taking off, so we're doing a lot with that to really continue to remain a player in the development of the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's, I think with all the fraud that's out there, which, we tend to think that the fraud is mostly in and around checks, which it is. But if it's on checks, it's going to be in any other payment mechanism that's out there. And, having easy to use tools for the banks and payment professionals to be able to make sure that they're paying who they think they're paying is just so critical.
I 100% agree, and it's trying to stay one step ahead of the fraudsters, but the fraudsters keep getting smarter too. So anything we can do to help tackle that problem, we are willing to roll up our sleeves and get involved. Our risk management advisory group has published a bunch of risk management standards, and we're looking at first party fraud. We're looking at what the RDFIs can do to help prevent fraud. So it's something at the top of our minds always.
Yeah, it's a pervasive problem, and like you said, the fraudsters are smart, and they tend to have a lot more time in their hands than most of us.
That's right. If only their powers could be used for good instead of evil.
I say that all the time. And I think I'm building something here. I think for the comic book that those will be the forces of evil that all the payments characters are fighting against.
You know what? I think you need to start getting out there with that copyright right now, Seth. I think,
I think maybe I need to get out of this studio a little more frequently. So let's talk about payments education. Certainly, the accreditations are sort of a separate and distinct topic, and I want to come back to that. But do you see the education really a strategic advantage for those people in and around the industry?
do. It's so important to stay on top of everything that's going on in the industry, but also to be able to really look ahead and understand what's coming next, so that you can prepare yourself and your institution. So payments education is so important as the payments conference, and you see all of the other industry conferences out there, and they continue to evolve based on what's going on in the industry at the moment. I mean, we've added over the last few years, we've added a stablecoin track, we've added an AI track, and we're really looking at what's next to make sure that we're staying on top of everything. And we're really fortunate, we talked already about collaboration, but we're really fortunate to have this whole cadre of payments experts who make it a point to stay on top of everything so that we can continue to go back to them and say, okay, this happened. What is this going to lead to? And so when we're planning our payments conference, we're using our conference planning committee to really look ahead and be the all stars on our bench. And then we have our Payments Institute, which is probably one of my favorite programs ever. And it's our payments school where you actually get to go, and you can go as a beginner, or you could go as an advanced and go to our master's classes. But the Institute it's so unique in that you are a student and you're learning from faculty, and this is a classroom setting, and it's just my favorite 4 days of the summer every year. So thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about that. But that's coming up next month, and we're thrilled to offer it.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go quite a few years ago, but it kind of coincided with my switch over from corporate treasury over to the banking world, and it was a fantastic experience back then.
It's only getting better, and we have a brand new venue this year in right outside of Chicago. So exciting stuff. Yeah.
Nice. So I want to go back to the accreditations for a second. So with the faster payments accreditation, how quickly has that ramped up? Did that surprise anybody as to how many people signed up and became certified? or accredited?
I don't think it was a surprise that we had that many people take the exam the first 2 years. Nacha has really set this gold standard for accreditations with the AAP and then the APRP and now the AFPP. I think that it really filled a void in the industry, and we wanted to make sure that we were there to kind of plant that stake in the ground. Accreditation programs are not easy to get off the ground. APRP took us about 18 months. We learned a lot of lessons from that. And so AFPP took us about 6 months longer, so about 2 years. But it's a very academic and rigorous process. It's not just a case of coming up with a couple of questions and administering an exam. All of these questions have to be sourced to a valid resource. There is a lot of analytical data science that goes into creating the exam. We have to start with the definition of what an AFPP is or what an APRP is. And then we have to build a blueprint based on what it's called a just sufficiently qualified candidate. So we have to build a blueprint based on what that candidate must know in order to be deemed an expert. So it's a rigorous process, but it's something that once we are done and it's launched, it's something we can look back and be super proud of. And I know that it's been really fulfilling in my career that I started the APRP and now the AFP, and to look back and see the folks with those initials after their names, knowing that our group of industry professionals really worked to get that done. It's really meaningful to me to see that.
And having gone through the AAP a good number of years ago, I can say this is not a check the box exercise. It is a deep set of knowledge you have to have. And I think I've probably forgotten more return codes than I ever even learned.
We hear that a lot. That's why continuing education is so important, so you don't ever have to take the exam again.
That's right. So are there plans at all or talk about potential additional accreditations perhaps? And you mentioned on the education front, tracks at the conference around both stablecoins and AI. Is there anything in the works there?
So there have been conversations, but I wouldn't say that they're in the works yet. It's hard to create an exam when you don't have the definitive source of knowledge. So for the AFPP, we started with a certificate program so that we could work together to come up with that body of knowledge. And based on that body of knowledge is what we could source the questions to. There really is no definitive source for stablecoins or for AI. So it really be a point of having to start over and really write that source, which is something that takes a lot of time. The other thing you don't really want to do is jump into something that may not have the longevity. So let's say that we do start a stablecoin accreditation somewhere down the line. It's probably not going to be this year or next year because we need to see where it's going in the future.
No, that's a great point. And it's also, I think, with both of those arenas, stablecoin and AI, so much is changing in real time that whatever you might envision today may look very differently, very different just a year out.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about the next generation of payment leaders. I know you've been very much involved in Notch's 15 under 40 award. Maybe you could talk about that and how do we continue as an industry to develop payment leaders?
Yeah. So we did not expect the 15 under 40 to be what it is. And what we have now are 45 of the most zealous and intensely passionate new generation of payments leaders coming through. And it's been so exciting to see that happening. I think that with payments being what it is, and with the stablecoin and AI and faster payments and all of the newfangledness of payments, I think we're going to continue to see this as a pulse point for the folks who are coming out of school, or not even coming out of school, who are working for these fintech startups that want to become a part of the payments world. There's a lot here that they can do, and what we are trying to do is really capture that excitement and deliver the education that they need. So one of the things that we're doing is really using our 15 under 40 finalists, our 45 folks, to help us craft some of this education to make sure that we're hitting the pulse of what they want. In addition to the old standards of of the ACH rules and things like that. And I'm not calling the ACH old. I should just point that out. I'm just saying that it's a
Yep.
standard. That's where we see our growth in our education, is to make sure that we're hitting the high notes for the next generation of folks and bringing along these leaders. I mean, we're seeing our generation starting to retire and starting to look ahead into the sunset, and so we have to make sure that we are preparing those next generation of leaders to keep the payment system safe and operating and to keep it growing.
So let's talk a little bit more about stable coins, faster payments. There's so many choices to make. And I think for people like I once was, sitting in a corporate treasury, having to decide which payment type am I going to use for this payment. There's so much to decide upon. Why is it so complicated?
Yeah. So I don't know that it's complicated. I think that the more choice you have, the more you want to learn about those choices, right? So if you go to the grocery store and you can only get one type of pasta noodle, then you're going to have spaghetti for the rest of your life, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. But if you can choose elbows or rotini, then you can have a fun shape for your macaroni and cheese, right? That's going to actually absorb that cheese. I think that payments is a little bit like that, where you can look ahead and choose how you want your payments to be delivered. With the faster payment, with the real time payment, you have all of that ISO 20022 language that you can include. With the stablecoin, you're going to have a little bit of security in that it's tied to the fiat based currency or collateral, but it's something that you can do beyond just the regular ACH. So it's a lot of things that you can choose from and really suit to your needs, to what kind of information or how quickly does your payment need to get there, or what kind of surety do you need in order to make that payment.
So what would you say to treasury professionals, to help them understand that maybe it shouldn't be so important to chase after the shiny new rails?
It's there. The rails are there. People are using it. It's a lower cost alternative. It does have fraud filters built in. We are making sure that the risk management guidelines are sticking to make sure that the it's safe and secure and all the things that we've always been. You lobbed me the softball about direct deposit. People don't want to come off direct deposit. It's there. They don't want to. I mean, a gig economy might want to use a real-time payment, and I'm all for that.
Hmm.
There's something for everybody, but my husband is just onboarding for a new job. Actually, today he was filling out his paperwork, and he said, "What's your direct deposit? What's our direct deposit information?" And I rattled off our routing number, and he said, "I do know that out of your head." I'm like, "What do you think I do for a living?" Like, of course I know that. So I think that the ACH has been there for more than 50 years. It's going to be here for more than 50 more.
That's right. So of course, knowing your routing number, I'll go back to the way you described so many of us in the industry, payments dorks.
Absolutely, yes. We
So
really are.
let's talk a little bit about the people component of I guess payments modernization. How much of modernization, and we hear that word so much, between modernization and transformation, is it more about the technology, or is it more really about the people and change management?
I would say it's both. You can't have a move towards modernization without the people driving it forward, but you can't modernize without technology. So I think you absolutely need a mix of both.
Yeah. So what happens when organizations modernize their tools? and they just don't do the appropriate level of training.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's always a risk. You can't just jump in and say, "Okay, I'm ready to do this." And that's when you're looking for the AFPPs and the APRPs and the AAPs. If you've got that level of expertise on your staff, then you're halfway there already. So relying on the folks who know the systems is so important. It's, I think, more important than just saying we have to do this in order to survive. You have to be able to be equipped to make those moves. And I'm glad that our accreditations can help with that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We live in this world today where with all the power on our phones, all the apps that we have on our phones, we don't need to get trained to figure out what happens when Amazon or Starbucks has made a change in their app. We just kind of adapt. And I think sometimes that pushes some people in a direction of saying, oh, well, when do I really need to learn about this? Be pretty straightforward. I'll just, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'll figure it out are famous last words. I mean, I think I'll figure it out is absolutely not what you want your payments people to say to you
Yeah.
because that's just ripe for failure.
Yep. So what does good payments leadership look like?
I mean, in 2 words, it's Jane Larimer. I mean, we are really lucky at Nacha to be led by Jane. I think payments leadership is someone who is looking ahead, but also seeing where we came from. Payments leadership is understanding the changing ecosystem. Payments leadership is looking to the people on your team to make sure that they are keeping abreast of everything that's going on. And that's where payments education is coming in. But it's someone who is easily able to adapt. And I think that we are really fortunate in our industry to be led by so many of these folks who are relying on the knowledge of the rest of the people in the industry. And that goes back to the collaboration. We have developed these relationships and it's somewhere we can just call somebody up and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And we are really fortunate at Nacha to have that level of talent on our board of directors and in our panel of volunteers. And that's where the leadership starts, is really building this culture of innovation and adaptation.
So along the way, 22 years at Nacha, which is spectacular. Have you had mentors both within Nacha as well as external to Nacha who've kind of helped, lead and develop you?
Yeah, I feel so lucky to have gotten into this industry because I developed these relationships that go so far beyond just a work relationship. I've already mentioned Jane, and she is an incredible mentor to me. In a couple of other podcasts, I've talked about Carrie Conahan, who is on our rules department here at Nacha. She helps develop and write the rules, and she is so passionate about it. And I've loved learning from her and looking at her really think through how everything connects to something else, and really thinking through her 35 or so years at Nacha and how we have grown and where we've gone. But I'm also really lucky to have worked with a lot of the leaders in the payments associations. And a lot of them have moved on and retired, but you know, you I learned so much from Mary Gilmeister, from Nell Campbell Drake at the Fed, from Rich Oliver at the Fed, from Joe Proto. I mean, there are so many folks in the industry who have been just leaders to me and that I have worked with. And I'm so lucky to have worked in payments at the time that I've worked in payments, because there have been so many influential leaders that have helped me develop.
Well, you just named some amazing individuals, very, very partial to one Joe Proto as well.
I think everyone is partial to Joe Proto. Yeah, I mean, he's so much. And it's funny because you can see you can see those folks coming up now. You're looking at Kara Ford, you're looking at of course, Peter Davey, Stephanie Tish. I mean, Stephanie Tish Davey, sorry, it's a habit. But it's the folks who are out there who are as passionate as you, that it's so much fun to just kind of kick back and talk about payments, in a geeky way. Peter Tapling, how have I not brought up Peter Tapling? It's all of those folks.
Yeah, well, you've just hit a whole slew of both past podcast guests that I've had and people that are on my list. So, Stephanie, I imagine you've been on the other side of that mentor equation as well, having mentored any number of people in the industry. Talk a little bit about what it's like to play that role for people in the industry.
Yeah, it's a blessing, and I don't say that often, but I've been able to work with a lot of the TPI faculty started as students, and that's been so rewarding to me, is to meet these kind of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed learners at TPI, the Payments Institute, and see them come along to become folks who are on our board of directors. It's been really fun to get to know them. I have a really strong team here at Nacha. There's always a fight over who has the best team. And I see some of my folks who are coming up, and it's just so energizing to me to see them succeeding and to see the lessons that I have kind of taught them, to see them teaching those lessons to their direct reports now. I'm so lucky. This is just such a great industry. I sound so like Polly Pocket kind of yay payments, but it really is. It's it's just the best, and we have the best people, and it just makes me happy.
Well, it's great to have you as both in the role that you provide at Nacha, but also as a cheerleader. Not that the industry necessarily needs the cheerleading, but it's certainly good to have that going on. Stephanie Prebish, thank you so much for joining me here today in our Whisperer studio, and look forward to additional conversations with you in the future.
Seth, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
An absolute pleasure. So that is a wrap for us today, Whisperees. I want to let you know that if you'd like to learn about how to sponsor an episode of the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast, you can email us at info@treasurywhisperer.com. Until next time on the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast, this is Seth Marlowe saying bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast with Seth Marlowe. The Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast is produced by the Treasury Whisperer Studio and Treasury Whisperer LLC. Copyright 2025. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this podcast without the express written consent of Treasury Whisperer LLC is strictly prohibited.